Hi, fearless flyers. Have you ever been told, that's impossible? Have you ever looked at a dream so big, so outrageous, so far from your reality that you laughed it off? Well, what if I told you that every revolutionary idea, every breathtaking invention, every life-shaking story started with that same kind of dream? The kind people love to mock. The kind people love to doubt. But what if you dared to believe anyway? Part 1. The question that starts it all. This isn't just a story. This is a battle cry. A call to war against every chain that has ever held you down. Against the quiet killers of ambition, fear, doubt, and that cold voice whispering, "Who do you think you are?" Let's get something straight. Dreams don't work unless you do, but once you move, even the sky can't hold you. Enter Rayan, a name the world had never heard. A boy most would walk past without a second glance. He lived in a town where the walls weren't made of bricks, but of broken spirits and abandoned hopes. It was a place where children learned early to stay quiet, to not expect much, and to live lives that fit in tiny, invisible boxes. But Rayan didn't fit, not even close. From the time he was 8, Rayan was obsessed with the sky. Not the way poets romanticize it, but in raw, mechanical fascination. While other boys played cricket, he watched the angles of migrating birds. While his friends collected comic books, Rayan sketched flight mechanics on the back of grocery bills. By the time he turned 11, he'd already tried to build a flying kite using recycled solar strips. It failed miserably, but in that failure, something beautiful ignited. Not despair, not shame, but obsession. He didn't want to just fly. He wanted to conquer the sky with nothing but light and hope. Rayan's dream wasn't to sit in a cockpit. No, he wanted to build a solar-powered aircraft, something so advanced, so bold, that could defy everything science had said was impossible at that scale. He imagined a manned aircraft that would never need fuel, one that would stay in the sky using only solar energy, gliding above clouds for hours, days, weeks. Clean, pure, revolutionary. But his vision wasn't met with curiosity. It was met with mockery. His teachers smirked when he presented the idea in science class. "Ambition is good, Rayan," one said, "but try to stay realistic." His classmates giggled, calling him the sky ghost. And at home, the whispers stung most. Poor boy, lost in fantasy. But what they didn't understand, what they couldn't possibly know, was that Rayan wasn't escaping reality. He was redesigning it. The ones who are told you can't are usually the ones who do. He wasn't interested in being normal. He was ready to be misunderstood, ridiculed, and rejected. He knew something the world hadn't figured out yet. You don't need a crowd to believe in you. One spark inside is stronger than 1,000 doubts outside. So while the world scrolled through their lives on tiny screens, Rayan read books on aviation, solar dynamics, and physics. He dug through scrapyard for parts. He turned failure into feedback. He turned loneliness into focus. It wasn't easy. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't clean. There were nights he cried into the same blueprints he spent hours perfecting. There were mornings he woke up to sore hands and swollen eyes. His room didn't look like a bedroom. It looked like a mad inventor's lab, filled with wires, gears, busted circuits, and scribbled equations. But he didn't care, because deep in his heart, Rayan knew one thing. The dreamers of today are the architects of tomorrow. And one day his dream would rise. Not just for him, but for every silent dreamer watching, for every child scared to speak out loud, for every soul convinced they weren't enough. He wasn't chasing fantasy. He was building destiny. And the world? It had no idea what was coming. Impossible is just the name fear gives to bold dreams. Once a wise man said wisely, "First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win." Part 2. The Storm of Doubt. At 16, most boys in Rand's town were working small jobs, preparing for a life that looked just like their fathers. Safe, predictable, bound by limits. But Rand? He was knee-deep in broken gears, rusted screws, and a vision that no one could understand. He had spent months scavenging the town's junkyard, picking up discarded metal like treasure, hauling solar panels left to rot, and salvaging the barely breathing engine from a dead scooter. His room had become a factory of madness, chaos, and creation. And then, finally, it happened. Rand built it. His first prototype. His version of what flight looked like to a boy with empty pockets, but an overflowing heart. It didn't look elegant. It wasn't slick or futuristic. In fact, it looked so bizarre that even Rand had moments of self-doubt. But to him, it was magic made real. He wheeled it into the town square at sunrise. Heart pounding, hands trembling, his eyes scanning the growing crowd with a mix of fear and anticipation. He thought maybe, just maybe, they'd understand. Maybe they'd see what he saw, a miracle in motion. But when he flipped the switch and the motor hummed with life, the crowd didn't gasp. They laughed. Loud, sharp, cruel. Echoes of mockery bounced between the stone buildings. Children pointed. Elders chuckled. One man even shouted, "Is this a flying trash can?" Rand froze. His breath caught in his throat. The world blurred around him. It felt like the sky itself had fallen. His dream, the one he had bled, sweated, and cried over, was now the town's newest joke. He abandoned the machine, turned away from the crowd, and ran. He didn't stop until he reached home, locked his door, collapsed on the floor, and for 2 months, he didn't touch a single wire. His soul was silent, his hands idle. Every time he looked at the scattered blueprints, pain pulsed through his chest. Shame crept in like poison. Doubt gripped his spine. Maybe they were right. Maybe I am foolish. He stopped visiting the junkyard. Stopped talking about the sky. Stopped being Rand. But something inside him refused to die. One night, alone in his dim room, Rand stood in front of the cracked mirror. He stared at his reflection, not with pride, but with fury. Not at the crowd, not at the town, but at himself. And then, trembling, voice raw, he shouted, "You don't get to quit, not after coming this far." Tears streamed down his cheeks, but this time they weren't tears of defeat. They were fuel. That moment changed everything. Dreams will break you before they bless you, just to see if you're worthy of carrying their power. Rand returned to the junkyard. Not quietly, but like a man possessed. He rebuilt the frame, redesigned the wing structure, replaced the clunky engine with a reworked version powered by cleaner current. He began studying aerodynamics in secret, sneaking into the city's central library and sitting through online university lectures under a false name. He watched hours of solar engineering content, took notes, made flashcards, asked questions in anonymous forums. Slowly, painfully, brilliantly, he became his own teacher. Failure didn't just visit Rand. It became his roommate. But instead of letting it destroy him, he used it. Each failed test flight wasn't a setback, it was data. Each burst capacitor wasn't a loss, it was a lesson. He was no longer just a dreamer. He was becoming a builder, a warrior, a future maker. You don't grow in applause. You grow in isolation. There were nights he'd wake up at 3 a.m. with a new idea and rush to sketch it before it vanished from his mind. Mornings when he skipped breakfast because he was too deep into testing battery load balances. He didn't care. He didn't need comfort. He needed purpose, and he had found it again. By the end of that year, Ryan's design looked nothing like his first version. It was sleeker, more calculated, resilient, just like him. But what truly changed wasn't just the machine, it was the man. Ryan had gone from a fragile dreamer to an unstoppable force. Fall down 7 times, stand up 8. But when you rise that 8th time, bring thunder. He didn't announce his next test. No crowd, no invitation. It was just him, the field, the machine, and the sky. He stood beside his creation, hand resting on its frame, and whispered, "They will see." Not because I want revenge, but because I want the next me to never be silenced. Ryan knew this was only the beginning. The storm of doubt hadn't destroyed him. It had forged him. Let them doubt you. Let them laugh. Their disbelief is just background noise. Keep building. Once a wise man said wisely, when you feel like quitting, remember why you started. Part 3, the moment of fire. By the time Ryan turned 18, he was no longer the wide-eyed boy with fragile hands and trembling dreams. He was steel forged in flame. He had rebuilt his flying machine from scratch 3 times. Not because he had to, but because each version was a step closer to the future he envisioned. The machine standing before him now wasn't made of junk. It was a masterpiece. Sleek, strong, silent with power, a predator of the skies. Its wings were smooth with refined aerodynamic curves. The solar panels shimmered like armor under the faint light of dawn. Every bolt, every wire, every inch of it had been kissed by sacrifice. The world hadn't changed. The town was still skeptical. People still whispered. But Ryan? He had become unshakable. This was no longer about validation. This was about vengeance, not the kind that hurts, but the kind that heals. The kind that proves to the universe, I'm not what they said I am. I'm what I built myself to be. At 4:47 a.m., under the deep silence of a sleeping town, Ryan rolled the machine out to the edge of the empty fields. The sky was still dark. The stars blinked like silent witnesses. His heart thundered. His hands? Steel. His soul? On fire. He walked around the machine, touching it gently, like a sculptor admiring his last brushstroke. He looked up at the stars, eyes filled with defiance, and whispered, "This is for every no I ever heard. This is for every tear. This is for every moment I wanted to give up." And with that, he climbed in. The cockpit was tight. Every switch, every button was homemade. No luxury, no digital display, just raw, wild invention. His invention. He closed his eyes for one breath, then flicked the main switch. The engine hummed, low at first, then louder, steady, confident. The wings stretched. The rotors whispered to life. He released the brakes. The field was uneven. Dust rose behind the wheels. His hands gripped the controls like a soldier going to war. In the distance, villagers had begun to gather again, drawn by the sound, some still laughing, some shaking their heads. Rayan didn't look at them. He looked at the sky, and then lift. The wheels left the ground. An inch, then 2, then 3. Then the machine soared. Higher, higher, and higher. The laughter stopped. Gasps replaced giggles. Cries of shock echoed through the valley. Children screamed in awe. Elders dropped their walking sticks. A man even fell to his knees. Rayan was flying. He tilted left, then right. The aircraft responded with grace. The sun had just started to rise, and in that golden hue, Rayan's silhouette passed in front of the morning light like a dream carved into the sky. He could see the entire town below. The rooftops, the school where they had laughed at his project, the square where they had pointed and mocked. All of it beneath him now. Don't chase revenge. Rise above. Let success be the scream that silence delivers. Tears slipped down his face, not of pain, but of arrival, of a moment he had replayed 1,000 times in his mind, now made real. Rayan flew for 47 minutes that day. When he finally descended and landed the craft in the far corner of the field, the crowd ran toward him. But this time no one laughed. They clapped. They cried. They stood in awe, staring at a boy they once called foolish. Rayan stepped out, sweat clinging to his skin, eyes glowing with triumph. He didn't say much, just one line. Next time, we go higher. That morning changed everything. Not because the town finally saw his worth, but because Rayan had proven something far more powerful. You are not born great. You become great when you burn through fire and still rise. It was no longer about the machine. It was about the message. And the world? The world was finally listening. They'll mock your fire until they need your light. Once a wise man said wisely, they told me I couldn't. So I did it twice and took pictures. Part 4. The War Within. After that first flight, the town buzzed with stories about the boy who touched the sky. Rayan had proven himself, or so it seemed. But what no one saw, what no one even imagined, was that the hardest war wasn't over. It was just beginning. Because the truth is, dreams aren't only threatened by the world outside. They're often suffocated by the doubts inside. In the quiet after his triumph, a different silence crept in. Not the silence of disbelief, but the silence of expectation. What now? What next? Was that flight just a fluke? Could he do it again? This time in front of people who truly mattered? An invitation came from the city's Innovation Expo, a place where the brightest minds, seasoned engineers, scientists, and entrepreneurs would gather to witness breakthrough technologies. And they wanted Rayan to showcase his solar aircraft. He should have been thrilled, but instead, fear coiled around his chest like a serpent. What if it failed on the big stage? What if they tore it apart? What if they laughed again? The idea of being humiliated not by villagers, but by experts. It shook him. These weren't just schoolyard bullies. These were people who had studied in the best universities, published in journals, built companies. And here he was, a boy with no degree, no team, just scraps and passion. What if I don't belong? He sat alone in his room, the walls closing in. The machine that once felt like his friend now looked like a threat. His confidence, once blazing, flickered like a dying flame. He didn't touch the aircraft for days. He ate less, slept even less. The excitement from the village had faded. The applause grew faint. All he could hear now was his inner critic whispering, "You're not enough." And then something happened. A letter slid under his door. Small, handwritten, crumpled at the corners. He opened it slowly. The handwriting was messy, innocent. Dear Rayan, I saw you fly. Now, I believe I can become an astronaut. Please don't stop. Love, Arfa, age 9. He froze. Read again, and again, and then he broke. Not from weakness, but from impact. The tears came like a flood. Not from fear, but from clarity. He clutched the letter to his chest and whispered, "It was never just about me. The dream was never just about me. It was about who I could inspire." That one message, it silenced every doubt. Because now he understood. You don't chase greatness to prove something. You chase it to unlock it in others. He picked himself up, cleaned the machine, refined it further. This time, not for approval, but for purpose. When the day of the expo arrived, Rayan rolled his aircraft into the city hall like a storm wrapped in calm. The marble floors, the cameras, the crowd of high-level professionals, it all tried to intimidate him. But Rayan walked in like a quiet force. He wasn't there to impress. He was there to ignite. The presentation began. Most inventors were escorted by teams, using digital slides and practice pitches. Rayan stood alone. No slides, no script. He simply looked at the crowd and said, "This machine was built with trash, tears, and truth. And it flies, not because of what it's made of, but because of what it stands for." He powered it up. The engine purred. The solar cells gleamed. The crowd leaned in. And when it lifted off, just a few feet, just a few seconds, it was enough to set fire to the room. The engineers didn't tear it apart. They stood up and clapped. The media rushed forward. The chief of innovation took the mic and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is not just invention. This is disruption." Within weeks, Rayan's story spread nationwide. He was awarded the National Award for Innovation in Clean Technology. Interviews poured in. Scholarships were offered. Young inventors from remote regions wrote to him, calling him the Sky Brother. And most poetic part? The same people who had once laughed now waited in line for hours just to take a photo with him. You were never too small. They were just too blind. But even amidst the fame, Rayan stayed grounded. He never forgot the silence of doubt. He never forgot the sting of ridicule. He never forgot Arfa's letter. Because he knew this was only the beginning. The war within wasn't over. But now, he had a weapon more powerful than any machine. Belief. The loudest roar doesn't come from engines. It comes from a heart that never gives up. Once a wise man said wisely, "If your dream only benefits you, it's not big enough." Part 5. Rise of the Dreamers. Rayan didn't stop after the award. He didn't sit back and soak in the applause, nor did he let success soften his hunger. He knew the flight wasn't the finish line, it was the launch pad. Because real victory, it isn't when you rise. It's when you reach back and pull others up with you. And that's exactly what Rayan did. He returned to his roots, not as a hero, but as a builder of bridges. He began traveling across villages, meeting young minds that society had forgotten. Kids who built windmills out of tin cans. Girls who coded on cracked phones. Boys who repaired radios without manuals. He saw in them what the world had failed to notice. Raw, burning potential. He gathered them. Not the brightest on paper, but the boldest in soul. No fancy degrees. No rich resumes. Just fire. They called themselves the Sky Chasers. Their lab? A refitted barn. Their funding? crowdsourced by dreamers. Their mission? Rebuild the world from the shadows. Under Rand's leadership, the Sky Chasers created drones that delivered medicine to flood-hit zones and hilltop villages where ambulances couldn't go. They built solar-powered balloons that floated over slums, beaming light where electricity had never existed. They didn't chase profits. They chased purpose. In just 2 years, their inventions saved lives, reconnected families, and gave hope to places the world had marked forgotten. Rayan's old town, once known for broken dreams, began to change. Not because a government plan arrived, not because an NGO stepped in, but because one boy dared to dream and then lit that fire in others. You don't fix a place by changing the system. You fix it by awakening the souls within it. The same streets that once echoed with laughter at Rayan's trash machine were now decorated with murals of invention. The same school that once dismissed him now hosted one of the nation's top youth innovation programs. And in the heart of the town square, where the world once laughed at a trembling boy, a statue now stood. Not of a grown man, but of a child. A boy holding a paper airplane, eyes locked on the sky. The plaque below it read, "You were born to do more than just exist. You were born to rise." That statue became a symbol, not of Rand alone, but of every kid who ever hid their dreams in notebooks. Every voice that was once told to stay quiet. Every mind that was once doubted. Rand often stood at the edge of that square, watching new kids gather around the statue, their eyes wide, their imaginations lighting up. And he'd whisper to himself, "Let them dream loud," because in the end, that's what it was all about. Dreaming loud, dreaming proud, dreaming without apology. So, to the one reading this, hear this clearly. Don't just dream quietly. Don't wait for permission. Don't worry about being called crazy. Be bold enough to dream anyway. Be brave enough to be laughed at. Be relentless enough to rise. So dare to dream, not just with your mind, but with your spirit. Don't fear looking foolish. Don't fear falling. Fear regret. Fear never trying. Fear settling into a life that feels safe but steals your fire. Because here's the ultimate truth. Impossible is just a dare. And you were never meant to live small. You were meant to build, to create, to fly. Just like Rand. Just like every dreamer who refuses to die quietly. This isn't the end of a story. It's the spark of 1,000 more. Now go. Create. Dare. Rise. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.